Thank you, Laura and team. What a joy it is to sing the gospel of our salvation, the gospel of our redemption, and a joy to hear God's people also singing. Really thankful, too, for over, Christmas and just the first Sunday of the new year, we had Calvin took a sermon on in December, and then Mark preached on the 29th, and then Mike on January 5th, and it was just really lovely. Gave us a bit of chance, Laura Lynn and I, to go and to spend time with my brother and family who lives south of the border, and we hadn't done that in years, and so it was a real joy. Most of all, I thank God for just the gifts that He has given people here at Bay Park and how they use those gifts for His glory. And how they serve. So just a wonderful joy and a big thank you. Also, it's just a really great weekend with young adults, Friday night, and then yesterday, the young adults, you wouldn't know it. They left the building so clean. But there was a whackload of young adults just gathering together, seeking Jesus Christ and drawing near to God together, just really encouraging one another in this great journey of faith, hope, and love. And I was here for a couple workshops, and I just thought, God, you are so good, just doing such wonderful things. So it was a joy. So be encouraged, church. We're kicking off a study of the book of Ecclesiastes. Any leftover hippies, any flower power children here this morning? I think there was just 2 in the first service. There's got to be more than 2. Oh, man. Bob. I think, at least no? Okay, well, if you grew up with boomer parents, you might remember hearing a song. It was by the Byrds called Turn, Turn, Turn. Anybody know the song by the Byrds, Turn, Turn, Turn? Yeah, there's a few of you who recognize the song. You probably grew up in a home where it was just played ad nauseum before, earbuds. You had to find other ways to kind of just get away from it. And I just bring that song up because, man, it was a hit for a number of years, and if you Google, if you don't know what the song is, you can Google it, and you might recognize, it's a song that you've heard in the elevator or something like that, and that's why we're talking about a song written by, performed by a band. It was Pete Seeger, but it was performed by a band that, was in the day before color was invented in the world, and, by a band that didn't even know how to spell birds properly, right? But it was pulled right out of this hit song, was pulled right out of Ecclesiastes. So you can talk to Rachel afterwards or Laura and say, ask them if you know the song and say, this should be our theme song for this series. We can sing Turn, Turn, Turn together. How many of you have read the book of Ecclesiastes? Oh, wow, a good number. How many of you have read it without skipping? Skimming, jumping. It's like, oh, where is this all going? Yeah. I'm not going to ask you how many like the book of Ecclesiastes, because that's a bit of a loaded question. So if you've read the book of Ecclesiastes, and don't worry, if you're like, I didn't even know that was a book. But if you've read the book of Ecclesiastes, what's one of the reoccurring refrains in it? Meaningless. Thank you. Yes, meaningless. All is meaningless or vanity. And so with that encouraging thought, let's just close in a word of prayer, and we're done for this morning. Now, so you might be wondering, why Ecclesiastes? I mean, it sounds like such a downer of a book, and it is a hard-hitting book of the Bible. We tend to think of life as linear. It's like we're moving, we're in a direction, we're going forward most of the time, some little regresses in life. But by and large, we're moving forward. Things are getting better. It's why we tend to look at previous generations and we look back at history and, oh, those poor people back then. Because we think that we're actually better off. And in some ways, we might be better off in terms of creature comforts, in terms of some of our health care. But in a lot of ways, life hasn't changed very much. And so we think of life in linear, that, we're progressing, if not as a society, even at least individually, and that we're somehow making some kind of a difference in the world, at least in our spheres of influence. And that's why we work hard. That's why we study. That's why we train. But as one wise person said, It's also why we go through midlife crisis, right? And if you haven't been through a midlife crisis, just wait. There comes a point in time when all of a sudden you realize, how much more time do I have? And you realize it's not just a cliche to say time flies. You realize, yeah, time is flying. And you look back on life and you go, yeah, I've experienced a lot, I've done a lot, but so what? Do you understand what I'm talking about? And it's not that you're looking at the things themselves and saying, well, I shouldn't have done them. Some of the things you go yeah, that was wonderful, and this was good, and did this, did that, accomplished this, got the plaque to show, the certificate to show, but you go, so what? There's this sense of, where is this all going? And does it even matter? And that's a hard place to be in life. But it's also at times a good place to be, especially if it causes us to think through how we're going to press into the life that is now and the life that is in front of us, even if it's not that long. And Ecclesiastes is a book that forces us to face some of these very questions, whether we're in a midlife crisis or past or beyond or not. It's a book that helps us to think, what does it really mean to live? And so we're going to start out, and we're in chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes, and we're just going to start out very easy because it's not an easy book. But we're going to start out with verse 1. And so if you're firing up your electronic device, that's pretty easy to find it. But if you're grabbing an old school Bible like me or the Pew Bible, just crack it open in the middle. You'll probably hit, Psalms or Proverbs. And, from the Psalms, you go one over, and then from you hit Proverbs, and then from Proverbs next right is Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. We'll just stop there as we're dipping our toes in. First off, a bit about the author. Solomon was born in the 10th century BC, the result of King David's affair, you could say predatory affair with Bathsheba. So not his fault, but his life didn't start out in good circumstances. It's a rough start. Anybody like the book of Proverbs, have memorized some Proverbs? Maybe on your screensaver, you've got a proverb or two, or you quote Proverbs every now and then. Yeah, a few people. Solomon curated, not wrote, but Solomon curated, organized a lot of the Proverbs. Solomon's rule in a lot of ways, because he became king, followed in the steps of his father David, King David, became king over this nation called the Israelites, God's chosen people. And it's quite a journey for the Israelites, and a lot of ups and more downs. But as Solomon became king, Israel prospered like never before. And so Solomon really had the privilege of ruling over what was in some ways considered Israel's golden years. I mean, the prosperity, the power was something that they had not experienced before. And you're like, oh, this is great. Yeah, it didn't end that way, unfortunately. Tragically, really sadly, it didn't end that way. It ended with the people being oppressed. Like, they weren't slaves back in Egypt, but they were overworked and overtaxed within their own nation, within their own country. And so it caused these deep divides politically, relationally, and such that the nation imploded. Like at the end of Solomon and afterwards, it's just like disaster. He left things in a mess. And so there's an implosion. The nation divides, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and Israel never fully recovered from it since. And so you're thinking, okay, so why? Why would God want somebody like Solomon to contribute to his love letter to us, to his holy scripture for us? Why would he use somebody like Solomon? And we haven't touched on some of the messy parts, the hard edges of Solomon's life. Well, to answer that question, because it's a good question to know before we dive into the book, we need to kind of have a framework and a context. If you go back to young Solomon, Ecclesiastes, old Solomon, we'll see that in a minute. But if you go back to young Solomon when he is first king in the book of Kings, 1 Kings, chapter 3. God presents him with this unprecedented request. Well, no, not a request, actually a gift that God hasn't given to any others, really. It's kind of exceptional. It's a rare gift. And he says, Solomon, ask from me anything you want, and I will give it to you. And so, wow, you're thinking young Solomon is just starting out as king. And so what does he ask for? 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 7 through 9. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and distinguish between right and wrong, for who is able to govern this great people of yours? Wow. So we're not talking some kind of spoiled brat, who grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth and who really, he just, was taking life for granted. Like, what a mature and also humble posture, right? I mean, he starts out, I'm just a child. Like, I'm king, but God is, you might as well call me a baby. And this task it's greater than my abilities. And he had a lot of resources at his disposition, yet God, the task, and of doing this task well, that's greater than my capacity. And then he also has this attitude, these are not my people. This is not my kingdom. I'm just your servant, and these are your people. Like, wow. Oh, to have more leaders at all levels in life, right? And from our homes to our cities, to our nation, right? That have that kind of posture. And so because Solomon didn't come with what would be typically in a young man's heart, like, give me money, like give me wealth, give me the fun things of life, give me power, give me success over my enemies. Because he asked for wisdom and discernment to know between right and wrong and how to govern God's people well for God's glory, God said, you know what, I'm going to give you wisdom unprecedented. You're going to rise above your peers in wisdom, but God said, I'm also going to give you wealth, length of days, so prosperity and power. And so God blessed Solomon immensely, which you can kind of see follows through with the golden years of Israel's history. But the very blessings, and it's not God's fault, God gave him these blessings freely, but the very blessings ended up turning Solomon's heart from a humble heart to a cold heart, to a hard heart. And so why Ecclesiastes? Why would God include, Solomon as one of the authors? It's because we get to learn from Solomon's failures. We get to learn from somebody else's failures. And so again, just so we have a good grasp on the context, Ecclesiastes is not a long book, but going to the end of the book, right? To the end of the book, chapter 12, and some would argue that this is kind of an editor's, maybe not Solomon himself. We might talk about that more later, but here we have in chapter 12 these words. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain. Solomon loved to write and to speak in word pictures, and they're beautiful word pictures. He goes on to say, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop and the grinders cease because they are few, and those looking through the windows grow dim. What? I'm just going to give you a couple examples. What are the grinders? What's that an image of? What is he talking about? Teeth. Yes, it's your teeth. What's happening, before the day and age of, like being able to pop in a new tooth and take out, a decaying tooth and popping in dentures or replacing a tooth with, a fake tooth. He's saying, look, I'm at that point where I'm losing teeth. What are the dim? When he says about those looking through the windows are growing dim, what's that an image of? Eyes. He's in the twilight years, in that final chapter of life. And he's looking back and he's saying, if I could pass on any wisdom, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. He picks up on that again in verse 6. Remember him before the silver cord is severed and the golden bowl is broken. He's talking about death. Before the pitcher is shattered at the spring and the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. And so he's saying not just remember him, a couple times when you're young, or remember him once a week, but he's saying, he's looking back, and it's almost as if there's this sense of, I wish I could turn back the clock to that young Solomon when my heart was humble and to live out my life differently. He's looking back, and there are regrets in his life. Even though he's achieved more than most people would dream of, he's also now living with this regret. What does it all mean? And I am not here by an accident, just like you are not here by an accident. He's saying, remember your Creator, because that changes everything. As a matter of fact, the closing words of Ecclesiastes are, well, here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, whether it is good or evil. Wow. Including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. And Solomon could look back and say, yeah, there's a lot of hidden things. There's a lot of not hidden things that I am really not proud of. And so Ecclesiastes is the invitation to live life with an eye on our Creator, kind of our beginning, and also our end. It's an invitation to be set free in life, to live a life without regrets, knowing that only comes, not by being consumed with the here and now, but that only happens when we know where we've come from and we understand, we have an eye on where it is all going. Well, that framework in mind, there's a lot more to be said about this, but with that in mind, let's go back to chapter 1 and let's make some more headway in this chapter. Verse 2, meaningless. There it is, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Okay, we repeat it again. Everything is meaningless. Guess what? It's all going to Hebel. That's not my words, that's God's word. In Hebrew, the word meaningless, NIV, the word vanity, ESV, is Hebel. And in Jewish, it's pronounced, the B is almost like a V, Hevel, Hevel. And so it's repeated 4 times in the opening verse, but 34 more times this word Hevel will come out throughout the book. This, by the way, this whole idea of this meaningless, it's all going to Hevel or Hebel. It's not like that adolescent rant that we put our parents through when we came home from school one day. And in all our wisdom and in all our humility, we declared school, math, English, French, it's all pointless. It's all meaningless. I shouldn't have to be subjected to doing this. No, that's not what the teacher is saying. A better way to understand Hebel is as breath. What it means is breath or vapor. So if I had a candle and I blew the candle out, there's a vapor, there's smoke afterwards. And he's saying that's what our life is like. And you try and you can't grab it, you can't contain it, and even if you do, it just disappears. It vanishes in no time. And so it carries the sense of Hebel's, the things we can't hold on to. Case in point, a corollary expression that we're going to see throughout the book is chasing after the wind. Chasing after the wind. It's a sense that life is short. We can't stop it, contain it, even less control it. Or we try, but we can't. So when a guy like Solomon, that would have probably made Elon Musk jealous, says it's all fleeting vapor, all vanity and meaningless. Isn't that just poetic exaggeration? It's just poetic exaggeration, right? No, it's not. Look at verses 3 through 9. What do people gain from their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Wow. Anybody ever take a philosophy class, for example, and the teacher asked more questions than he gave answers, and you got so frustrated, like, just quit asking us these questions that make our heads hurt and just tell us the answer. Ecclesiastes is a bit like that teacher. And it's a pedagogical tool, an old one. And the point and the aim of that tool, of these asking these very probing, hard questions, was to get the student to think through the answer for himself and to come to the conclusion after having done some hard work so that they own the conclusion instead of just parroting words that they heard somebody else say, but they don't really hold on to. And so that's Ecclesiastes. And picking up on the theme of everything is meaningless, the teacher starts with work and says, what gain meaning, not what have you done or what have I done, but what gain means, what will remain when it's all said and done? What's going to be left over? When it's all said and done and life is done, what's going to be left of the pie, of all the work and all the toil? And this is a question, quite frankly, that most of us would like to ignore because it's a bit of a haunting question. You know, according to some stats, our jobs rank number 2 of total time spent in a lifetime. Second only to sleep. But that's only for paid work. But when the teacher's talking about labor or toil, it's not just what we do at our jobs, it's all the energy that we pour out of even when we're not at work in order to keep up with the Joneses or get ahead of the Joneses in order to try and secure and establish our lives. Now, before you quit your job and say, yeah, this is all depressing, I'm just going to go live off-grid like a hermit, that too, by the way, is a lot of work. And what's the point? Right? What does it all end up giving? The question is, when it's all said and done, what will remain? And so even if, like Solomon, you have the privilege in life of being responsible for great things, and Solomon, many buildings, we'll see that in chapter 2, just incredible buildings. So you have these buildings, these monuments, and there's plaques, and your name is on the plaque, built by. Or if, like Solomon, incredible wealth, and you're like, man, you wouldn't believe the legacy. I'm not trying to be proud, but just, people only knew the legacy I'm going to leave my kids and some charities and whatnot. Even if that's the case, how long will that last? Well, for you, after you die, you're not taking that plaque or the building with you, or any other possessions for that matter. And the wealth doesn't come. So how much of it remains is a big question. And even for those that you leave it to, how long will people care about the plaque and the name on it? Or even notice it? How many years? Right? And the wealth, well, depending on your family, your relatives and who you gave it to, how long will it last? Hopefully more than 6 months, right? Maybe 6 years, maybe 20 years. Wow. But in light of eternity, I'm like, what was the point of all that? The teacher takes illustrations from the natural world, from the natural sciences, to kind of prove his point, to drive it home. Generations come and go. How much do you know about your great-grandparents? Could you write a biography or just even a brief little bio about your great-grandparents? Your great-great-grandparents? Some of you, yes, but most of us would know very little about even our great-grandparents, even less about our great-great-grandparents. That's not that far away. What about the sun? Well, it's wonderful when it comes up, but then it also sets. Streams flow to the oceans, to the lakes, and to the oceans, and then back out again. And so it's really pressing into that whole point that we think life is linear and somehow we are at least progressing, we're making headway, but the teacher is saying life is cyclical. We live with this illusion that it's linear, but it is cyclical. Like generations before us were born, we live and we love, we work and sleep, and eventually we die and life goes on. And so what have we gained? What remains? And so on that joyful note, look down at verses 10 and 11. Is there anything of which one can say, look, there is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. Because life is so tedious and cyclical, a vapor, we look to new things to kind of break us out of the tedium, out of the cycle, like new technologies and new discoveries. I can't help but think, though, that even with every advancement, technologically wise, we're kind of like, wow, smartphones, they're brilliant for keeping us connected, and they've made us so much smarter. There's a real downside, right? And we're growing into that as a society, recognizing that some of our technologies come with great pain and great costs. And I think of all the advertisement right now about AI, how it's going to make our life better. And already we know it's like, yes, there's some wonderful things about AI, and there's some huge, huge problems. And what is it? We see that cycle going over and over again. Oh, we live in a world right now where new planets are being discovered, and the universe, like we're seeing further than we've ever seen before, and we've discovered great and new medications. It's the Gazdik sinuses. I'm on medication this morning. I'm thankful for the medication. But here's the thing. All of the new this and that has not made a single dent or change in the fact that you and I will find throughout our life that time flies, and we will most certainly what? Die. It's like, what? With all of this, we're still left in this treadmill of we come and we go, and you go, wow, that's depressing, right? Yes, it is. And yet, no. And yet, no. Paraphrasing David Gibson, it's an invitation to stop pretending that if we get the promotion, bring up good children, we'll be significant and leave a lasting legacy. Stop pretending that if we change jobs or migrate to the sun, we won't experience the humdrum tedium of ordinary life. Stop pretending that if we move into a new house, we'll be happy and never want to move again. Stop pretending that if we end one relationship or start a new one, we won't feel trapped again. Stop pretending that if we were married, weren't married, had money, we'd be content. Stop pretending that once we get through this busy week, this busy season, that life will slow down and we will be serene and peaceful. Stop pretending that time is on our side and that the next this or that will break us free from the weariness of life under the sun. Or to put it another way, stop thinking that meaning and happiness are in novelty. What's new today will soon feel old. I mean, our closets, our garages, our attics, our basement are a testimony to that, right? Verses 12 through 16. We're getting there. You're doing well. Hang in there. We'll pull this up. But not in verses 12 and 16. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I've experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. And to the students in our midst, I say you can use that on your next essay. Put that down. The more knowledge, the more grief. Another expression that helps us to understand Ecclesiastes was we just read in chapter 3 is under the sun, and it will appear again and again. Under the sun is another one of those word pictures that expresses how we tend to go about our lives. With this focus of all there is what's here and now under the sun in my little domain and in my little world. And we're obsessed and we're focused on that, thinking that if we just keep doing the work we're doing and somehow try and push through the worries that we have and the busyness, that somehow it will lead to something better at some point. And we're constantly trying. Life under the sun, life under the sun. And Ecclesiastes is actually an invitation to lift our eyes and to say, but what is above the sun? To lift our eyes to heaven and to God. You hear the echoes, right? An older, regretful Solomon saying, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. That there is more to just life than life under the sun. And I would suggest that we know that there is more than life under the sun. Most people, you don't have to be a Christian to experience this, but most of us at some point in time, and this has gone throughout history of humanity, at some point in time, whether we're looking up at the stars at night and going, no way, this is an accident. There's more to life than just this. Or it's in those moments where we're just kind of, the noise all around us has been muted to some extent. And we're left with our own thoughts and our own selves. And as we think, there's this voice that says, there's more to life. There's more to life than the daily grind. There's more to life than meets the eyes. And we know, and that is God's call on our lives. Saying, look up to life above the sun, to God. And here's the beautiful thing. Solomon ended up life with a lot of regrets, but what Solomon didn't know is that God himself, the one who you'd say is above the sun, the creator God that he talks about, the very one that he says, I'm going to have to now give an account and the things that I've done, oh my goodness. In man's eyes, whoo, wow. In God's eyes, oh no. The scales aren't looking good. What he didn't know is that God himself would come to live life with us, among us, under the sun, in order to break us free from the cycle of birth and death, toil with no gain. Jesus Christ is literally the answer to the book of Ecclesiastes. To breaking us out of this cycle of toil with no gain, wisdom with no change. In the Gospel of John, we read of how Jesus, the one by whom we were created, so remember your Creator, but also the one for whom to live in relationship with God, we were created. This very same Jesus is light and life. And he entered into the brokenness and futility of our lives in order to free us from it. Jesus, light and life, did this by facing death. We often say death is the great equalizer. It's also the great taker, the great robber. And by defeating death for us through the cross and the empty tomb. Think of it. All of our futile, all of our meaningless, all of our vain and foolish living nailed to the cross. The regrets, the wish I could turn back the clock. And in rising again, Jesus kicked wide open the gate to life above the sun. To life restored with God. But it's more than that. It's more than just even kicking wide open the door for life above the sun, life eternal, when we all get to heaven. Jesus himself said, John 10, I have come that you might have life, what? Eternal, yes, but that you might have life in the here and now that can be described as full, as abundant. I would say that's the opposite of the way Solomon ended his days with. There's something hollow and empty. Saying life that is full and abundant. Abundant life is here in Jesus Christ for those who turn and who trust in Jesus. For all the days of their lives under the sun, who do life, their days under the sun with the Son of God. And so as we come to communion, this is Jesus inviting us to cast ourselves upon him afresh today. To stop pretending and to start living by remembering him all the days of our life. Inviting him to lead us into life abundant and eternal. To shape us, to mold us, and to produce through the power of the Holy Spirit glorious fruit from our lives. Fruit that remains. Fruit that will outlast our lives and even our legacy. Communion is for all who have trusted in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, who looked at Jesus as the one who died on the cross for our sins and who rose again, that we might be reconciled to God. And so you don't have to be a member of Bay Park. If you are here visiting and this is your first time, but you say, yes, I love Jesus and I've turned to him and I trust in Jesus, then communion is for you. Welcome. And the way we do communion here at Bay Park is the bread in a moment will be passed, and then the cup. We hold on to it, and at the appropriate time, we'll partake together. And as it's being passed, there will just be some quiet music playing in the background. This is our opportunity to turn to God and to say, God, I'm remembering you today. And you might do that with your Bible open to Ecclesiastes or to John 10. You might also just do that by closing your eyes and just praying and say, God, search my heart and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thought and lead me in the way everlasting and for your glory. And so, church, Jesus is inviting us to come and to root and to ground our lives, to recalibrate our lives around the gospel of our salvation. Invite those who are serving the bread to come and to start with the bread.